Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to talk in some detail about the use of urgency for this bill, but before I do need to address some of the points raised by the previous speaker, where he said that this bill is the height of responsibility and fairness. This bill that seeks to retrospectively remove the legal entitlements of some of the poorest New Zealanders, all for the purpose of saving this government money. And that, I think, goes to, we're hearing consistently from this side of the House that the financial responsibility means that they have to bring this bill to the House, because any money that would go to those people would obviously be irresponsible for government to hand out money to people, because the intent of this bill was always clear that it was supposed to be the day after, even though the legislation reads the day on which the stand-down period ends. They say, I don't know how that can lead people to think the day after. Some of you read the words, benefits commence on the day on which the stand-down period ends, and suddenly you interpret that as the day after, which is what this government has been doing. And they're saying, well, they don't seem to understand the rule of law, because they're telling us that despite the fact that the courts have interpreted this, that, you know, based on the debates and reading this legislation the day on which, that actually the intent was always clear that it was the day after. Now, that really does stretch their credibility, Mr. Speaker. It really does stretch credibility. So I would like to speak a little bit more too, specifically because this is the second reading. This is the time where we normally would have been through a select committee process. And this government, and a previous speaker, has told us, well, we have been through a select committee process because there was a provision in another bill that was relating to the extension of youth services that was entitled Remedial Matters, that actually sought to retrospectively deny these people their rights. It looked nothing like this piece of legislation, might I say, but there was a provision in that piece of legislation that covers this, so therefore we've been through the process. Well, I do want to point out to people that there was one submission that picked up this point. And I can't even talk about what we were told from the departmental advisors, because that is business still in front of the select committee. So I would be breaching privilege if I spoke about the advice that we were given in relation to that point in this bill. So this is I think, raises some significant process issues that we are now debating a bill, and they're telling us that that process applies to this and means we can go through this under urgency, but I cannot talk about the detail of it because it's still under select committee privilege. And that is worrying. That is not a good process at all. And I would like to remind people to think about where the appropriate use of urgency. And there was a book published on this called What's the Hurry a few years ago that talked about 10 guiding principles for the use of urgency for this House to consider. And they were that legislatures should allow time and opportunity for informed and open policy deliberation. That has not happened. Legislative process should allow sufficient time and opportunity for adequate scrutiny of bills. A day? No, that is not adequate time. That condition has not been met. Citizens should be able to participate in the legislative process. Again, that has not happened. Parliament should operate in a transparent manner. Well, putting a provision inside another bill on a very substantive point hidden as a remedial matter that they were hoping nobody would pick up, that is not transparent. Moving this through under urgency without the ability for public participation, that is not transparent. refusing to implement the court's decisions and bringing this through under this process is not transparent and does not uphold the rule of law. The next point is the House should strive to produce high quality legislation. How can we produce high quality legislation when we are rushing it through? Legislation should not jeopardise fundamental constitutional rights and principles, and one of those is around the rule of law and non-retrospective legislation. And here we are, putting through under urgency retrospective legislation that undermines the rule of law. And the point 7 is Parliament should follow stable procedural rules. Point number 8, Parliament should foster, not erode, respect for itself as an institution. And that, to me, goes to the very, very heart of what is wrong with this piece of legislation. When we have over 1 million people who didn't vote, where we have people not going to work and income because they find that experience so alienating that they are living in cars because they don't want to deal with it. And here, the people's benefits, they get cut by 100% or 50% if they miss a bus and miss an appointment. And here the government is making a very, very fundamental misinterpretation of a law that reads to me so clearly, who is saying, yes, we made a mistake, and we're just going to fix that up and deny all of you your rights over the last 18 years. Not, okay, we made a mistake, we're going to fix this for the future, which would have been credible. We would have supported that if you'd brought that case. But no, you are doing it retrospectively. And it is so out of balance with those people's experience of how you, not you, Mr. Speaker, the government implements the system. It is so out of balance and such a misuse of power that it undermines the respect for Parliament as an institution. And the 9th point is that government has the right to government as long as it commands a majority, but the respect for this principle has to be balanced against all of the other points, which we have clearly seen are not met by this legislation. And Parliament should be able to enact legislation quickly in emergency, and this says actual emergency situations. Well, tell me where the emergency is beyond the fact that people are putting in claims for an average of $80 to get back from the government to be able to put some food on their table before Christmas, to access a right that the courts have established very clearly and well over a year ago that they are entitled to. Where is the emergency in that? This is a shameful use of the House and the process and a misuse of power by this government. And I would like, in this very short period of time remaining to me, to point out some of the issues that people have been raising that I've been able to see, even though we haven't had a select committee process, sadly, where one person's comment was, if only someone had told Greece that dealing with debt was as simple as passing a law saying they don't have to pay. People are seeing this. People who don't have much resource, who have a fragile relationship with the state, are watching this, and their confidence is being eroded. People have talked about the fact I've seen where they would like to apply, but actually their situation at the moment is that they would have to print out the forms, sign it, get down to a work and income office, and they don't have a printer. They don't have access in terms of filling in the forms on email to being able to scan and sign it, and they can't get down there. Here are people who are being told that they've just found out they've got this legal entitlement and they want to access it, and they are going, I don't know how to do this. And they basically will have too short a period of time because of where this cuts off. Unless, of course, it was after May 2014, and those people will have a few weeks until the 8th of January. Over a holiday period, over an incredibly stressful time of the year, people with other languages who may not find out, the government's made no commitment to be able to notify anyone, to let them know of those rights. We're also hearing from people that that they're actually not in a position to be able to access the technology, to be able to apply. And this really, we need to go back to the point of these are stand downs, which is a debatable point and has been for a long time in this house because it impacts on people's ability to provide shelter and feed themselves.